All right. Esther, her sister Dae, and their friends were at the 600th WOW professional wrestling event, downtown Chicago. And they had front row seats. They're excited for the show to start. When the lights finally dimmed down, Master of Ceremonies came out. His name was Michael Wade, and he always wore a suit, and he addressed everybody very professionally as a master of ceremony. And he said the first event would be for the heavyweight championship of the world, and that was going to be against Iron Hand Dan, the challenger, and the Phoenix, the champion. And so the match started. Iron Hand Dan was very confident, large, muscular, well-built wrestler, but he was overmatched. And he had been surrounded by two guards, twin sisters actually. They had grown up in professional wrestling. Their names were Daniel, Elizabeth, and Tracy Ann. And during the match, Tracy Ann noticed Esther and her girlfriends and gave her a wink. Esther found this amusing and yet surprising that she broke her concentration on protecting Iron Hand Dan during the match. So at any rate, the Phoenix and the challenger, they fought. They did the usual professional wrestling, acrobatics, body slams, fist chest slams, the kicks, the leg kicks, the near pins. But in the end, the Phoenix won. And Iron Man Dan, Iron Hand Dan was left the wrestling area. So the Phoenix bragged a little bit, and then they went on with 4 more wrestling matches. And after about 2 hours of entertainment, and the audience loved it all, the girls hadn't sat down in their chairs at all during the entire wrestling matches because they were all too exciting, and everybody was on their feet, yelling and screaming. So after it would have been the 5th match, Michael Wade came out, the Master of Ceremonies, and he announced how every event they would allow an unknown to challenge the heavyweight champion of the WOW, which was the Phoenix. And this was no exception. And so he had the Phoenix in the corner, ready to speak, he grabbed the golden microphone from Michael Wade, and he told everybody how great he was, how trained he was, how experienced he was, and that yes, he would accept any challenge from any unknown. And so he handed the microphone back to Michael Wade. Michael Wade said, "Tonight's challenger is going to be Satan." And at that, the lights zoomed around all over the stadium, came down on a small man, frail looking, had a pale, almost white complexion, and he had a small mustache, middle of his lip. So he's walking down the main aisle towards the wrestling ring. Lights are following him, and he's got bodyguards dressed in black going down the aisle ahead of him, keeping people away from him. When he reaches the ring, he enters, and all of the bodyguards that he's been surrounded with pull the ropes open so that he has no trouble getting in. And he walks up to Michael Wade, grabs the microphone, and explains that his name is Dr. Man, and that he's the manager of Satan, and that they felt that a more obvious professional introduction by Dr. Man would be appropriate for Satan. And so at that point, some large doors in the back started to open. They were the size of warehouse doors. They hadn't been opened in a while, and they screeched rusty sounds. And everybody had noticed that the temperature in the Coliseum had been dropping, and it was almost to the point where you could see your breath. So at that point, Dr. Mann said he wanted to introduce his man, the next heavyweight champion of the WOW, Satan. All the lights zoomed around, went to the door that had just opened, and through that door came trotting in a very majestic style 6 Frisian horses pulling a stage coach that was very, very ornate, cast iron that had no windows. It was old wood and cast iron construction, and the horses were being handled by a driver that was wearing a top hat and a trench coat. And the horses, you could see their breath. They were breathing hard. The stagecoach appeared to be extremely heavy. Dr. Mann's guard had made certain that the main aisle had been cleared, and the horses and the stagecoach came down the main aisle towards the wrestling ring. And they stopped at the wrestling ring, and then slowly the top of the stagecoach, The roof seemed to disappear. A light came beaming out of it. And suddenly, a man started rising out from the coach. And he was lifted up. And it was a very large, muscular person dressed in an orange red with a mask over his face that you couldn't see his face. There were flames on his boots. He had red boots. He had a narrow, thin orange belt. And on the back of his outfit was flames. And as he stood there on his podium, he looked about and he addressed everybody, and his voice was heard throughout the stadium, and he said, "My children, I love you. I am here to start a new beginning." And with that, he ran across the stage top, jumped onto the wrestling stage, and over the ropes on the wrestling ring, and into the wrestling ring. He held his arms up, showing his biceps, how muscular he was, and his manager, Dr. Mann, as everybody's applause, and the people were excited. They liked this showmanship. They were all applauding. And Dr. Mann started to say how his man was going to be the next heavyweight championship of the WOW, and that he had come here to save the world. And so, at that, Dr. Mann handed the microphone back to Michael Wade. Michael Wade called over the Phoenix and Satan. They looked at each other. The Phoenix wasn't certain what to make of this. His manager had been in the ring. His manager was Big James. He wasn't comfortable with this, especially when Dr. Mann pulled out a signed agreement by WOW that this was going to be a championship match, and that neither one could leave the ring and win. They had to win by pin. Either wrestler, if they left the ring and didn't return, would lose. Big James didn't like that, but the Phoenix argued with him that he'd take care of Satan and get rid of him in quick order. So Big James, he told the Phoenix, well, make it quick, because they had a bad feeling about this. So during the match, they started to wrestle. After they introduced the ref, the ref's name was John. Everybody knew John. and appreciated him. He's a small man, slightly overweight, but he was fair. And he had been with the WOW since its inception. So he had told them both the rules, which they already knew. Started the match. And as before, there was some body slamming back and forth. But this time, Satan seldom budged any. He was like pounding on a rock or a tree. It didn't move. Satan picked up the Phoenix, slammed him easily down to the mat. And of course, wrestling mats flex, and the Phoenix really wasn't hurt the first time, but on the third and fourth time, it started to wear on the Phoenix. Satan had thrown the Phoenix into the ropes, and as the Phoenix came back, Satan raised his foot into the chest of the Phoenix and stopped him cold. It had been a short match. The Phoenix had a shocking look on his face, collapsed onto the mat, and Satan walked above him, put his foot on his chest, and John, the referee, counted the Phoenix 3 seconds, and he had lost the match. Satan had won the heavyweight championship of the WOW, and he was an unknown up to this point. Dr. Simon Starr was called quickly to the mat because the Phoenix wasn't moving, and the Phoenix had to be hauled off on a cart. When Michael Wade came into the wrestling arena, he announced Satan as the winner, and he told people that the Phoenix was off to the hospital and that they all wished him well. He held up Satan's arm as a champion, and the crowd went wild. Everybody was extremely excited. The WOW had a new heavyweight champion.